I give the call to the member for Mitchell.
Thank you, Speaker. It has been a decade since I asked a question. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. At a time when Australian families are being hit by Labor's price hikes in electricity and gas, why on earth did this government sign up to a new United Nations fund which will channel Australian taxpayers' money to other countries, including China?
Order. Order. There is far too much. There is far too much noise. The Minister for Defence Industry and the Minister for International Development and Pacific is making far too much. Members on my right will come to order so I can hear the Minister in silence. I give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
For noticing the shoes.
They set you up. That was the biggest set-up since Catherine Deves.
Order. There is far too much noise on my right and my left. When the House comes to order, I'm issuing a general warning. There is far too much noise in the chamber. Give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Speaker. It's unsurprising, perhaps, to get a question like that from this opposition, led by a man who thinks that the impact on the Pacific of climate change is a laughing matter, Mr Speaker, who thinks it's a great big joke, because we don't on this side of the House, Mr Speaker. We will work with the Pacific because we know that that is in our interests as a country in a very complicated geopolitical environment, Mr Speaker. Now, Mr Speaker, not only does this opposition engage in this sort of cheap dog-whistling politics, Mr Speaker, they also don't even know what was agreed. They don't even know what was agreed, and I'm surprised to get a question like this from a man who was the Minister for the Pacific, Mr Speaker. That's the best they can do. He was the man in charge of our relations with our region, Mr Speaker.
The Minister will take a break. I will hear on a point of order from the member for Mitchell.
Thank you, Speaker. It's on relevance. The Minister wasn't listening to the question. I asked why the money was going to China, was the question, not the Pacific.
The point of order, the Minister is being relevant. The question was a very broad question, and he is being entirely relevant. I give him the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, I guess if you're the Minister for the Pacific and you didn't actually go to the Pacific, that's probably the sort of point of order you would take, Mr Speaker. The other point of order you would take if you'd asked a question like that is that one of relevance because, Mr Speaker, the opposition appears unaware that, in fact, as part of these negotiations and as part of these discussions, Australia argued and successfully argued that the donor base should be reviewed so that those countries that weren't rich in 1992 but have now become developed and are now wealthy should contribute, not receive, should contribute to the fund, Mr Speaker. That might have passed you by.
Members on my left.
That might have passed you by because that's exactly what we argued. And we were joined by the United States and the European Union and Canada and New Zealand, Mr Speaker. So
the member for
I understand the difference between donor and recipient might be a little bit confusing to those opposite, Mr Speaker, but that's exactly what we argued, and that was exactly reflected by the text which indicates a multiplicity of donors and a revision of the donor base, Mr Speaker. So if the opposition's going to go down this cheap and nasty road, they want to at least get their facts right, Mr Speaker, because previous Prime Ministers have understood that engagement on these issues is important. John Howard knew that in the aftermath of the tsunami. He knew that contributing to Indonesia's recovery was good for Indonesia, good for our region and good for Australia. But, Mr Speaker, John Howard was a leader. John Howard was a leader who understood our national interest. The current leader of the opposition does not understand the national interest. He just understands cheap and pathetic politics.